In this video, I'm going to teach you how to annotate drawings. And annotations is a term that refers to any types of notes on your drawing, like tags or grid lines, room labels, dimensions, north arrows, or even just notes themselves. So I'm going to teach you how to hide and show annotations, which we already sort of have practiced a little bit, but we're going to review it. I'm going to teach you how to place a north arrow on plan view on plan views. I'm also going to teach you how to place interim and overall dimensions and set the precision. And then we'll place some notes in a later video with a little bit more detail. What I'm going to do first is start on this plan. And you can see here, this is our level 2 floor plan. And right now it's got so much information on it. So what I'm going to do is just on this particular plan, I'm going to go ahead and hide the wall tags. And so you can hide, as we've talked about, hide and reveal anything. I'm going to right click and hide in view. If I hit elements, it's going to hide just that tag. If I hit category, it's going to hide all of the wall tags. So we'll go ahead and hide those, and we will also hide the door tags as well, and that'll clean things up just a little bit. So now that we know how to hide them, we can also reveal them by, again, hovering down here, showing the light bulb. And all we have to do now to show these again is to tab through if we can't drag them, right click and unhide in view. So now that we've got a little bit better visibility on this plan, I'm going to teach you how to add a north arrow. Now, north arrows are usually somewhere in this lower left-hand corner of a drawing. And keep in mind that there's both project north and drawing north. So if a project, for example, is not perfectly aligned with the cardinal directions, if it's a little bit crooked, let's say, on a site, then it will have a project north that might cause the north arrow to be a little bit angled, whereas on our sheet north, we want to make sure that the north arrow is straight. And that's so that we can refer to walls as being the north wall, the east wall, the south wall, or the west wall. And we don't want a floor plan to be crooked on a sheet, even if it's crooked on a site. So you'll be dealing with project north, which is how the building is situated on a site, and sheet north, which is how it's situated on a sheet. For right now, we're going to just talk about sheet north. So we'll go ahead and go to the annotate tab, and you can go to symbol, and there's going to be a couple available. Hopefully you've got this north arrow selected. There's only 2. If it's not there, you can also go to the load family and go to the annotations, and you will be able to load your north arrow here. There's real fancy ones and regular ones. It doesn't really matter which one you select. We'll go ahead and just place the one that looks like an arrow there. Now, you can put it here, or you can put it here, you can put it here, but it needs to be somewhere in this lower left-hand corner. I'm going to go ahead and put mine just right above that drawing tag right there. We also need a north arrow on our design plan, and so we'll do the same thing. We'll put a symbol there, and we'll put our north arrow right above that drawing label, just like that. So that's how you create your north arrow. We're also going to create interim and overall dimensions. Now, there's really no end to the amount of things that you can dimension on a floor plan or any sort of drawing, but we are not creating one of those super detailed drawing sets that shows an entire project. We're just trying to illustrate the Revit skills that we've encountered and mastered so far. So what I want to do is just do some very basic dimension lines, and we're going to start by doing it on our design plan. And this might be helpful for us, for example, to show sizes of rooms. Again, sometimes we dimension a floor plan here, but because there's so much content on this plan already, I'm going to go ahead and just draw it on the design plan. But as we know, they'll show up on both because these were duplicates of each other. So in order to dimension, we're going to go to the Annotate tab, and we're going to start with a linear dimension. Now, keep in mind that when you dimension, it's good graphic standards to have the dimensions, the longest dimensions on the outermost dimension line, and as you get more detailed and the dimensions get smaller, they get closer to the drawing. So I'll show you what I mean right now. When I hit the dimension tab or button here, you can see it's going to create this dimension style, and that's perfectly fine. It's going to ask me where I want to start. Now, I'm not sure. Oh, I started with a linear dimension. I actually want to start with an aligned dimension. So I'm going to click here. If you don't have that screen, you can also go to Annotate and Aligned here. And notice it says, well, where do you want to pick the dimension up from? Wall faces or wall center lines? And it really just depends on what information you're trying to convey. If you're trying to talk about the general size of the building, it might be wall face to wall face. If you're trying to instruct someone where to start the framing of the wall, you would do center line to center line. Right now, we're going to do wall faces. So I'm going to go from this wall face all the way over to this wall face. So click number 2 here, and then I'm going to drag it up and do my third click there. Okay, now I may want to go ahead and do center line to center line. So I'm going to still start with the exterior wall, and then I'm going to switch to a center line. You can see it's allowing me to and I'm going to go to wall face here. And then I can click. Okay. Now, you can see here that there's a little tiny offset here, but we don't always want our dimension lines to be that long. So we can either move each of these up manually by dragging the grips, or we can move the dimension string by adding and moving it just a little bit closer down if we're not going to fill in that space. Now, we could also add an additional string here, but you don't want to have a bunch of overlap. So, for example, you could bring these up just slightly. Now, you don't, it depends, of course, on your firm, but you don't really want to have like place another dimension line here because the overlap here will cause some confusion. So I'm going to duplicate those dimensions here, but I'm also going to pull the center line of this one. So you can see that I'm giving additional information, but these lines, these dimensions are not changing. And you can see here there's a little bit of overlap. I'm going to bring this whole string, dimension string down just a little bit. And you can see here, this is not good. So you want to, you can bring this down here like that. Bring this down like that. Notice how they're even, they're at the same height so that they're easier to read, and we can see that. Look, they're a ½ inch off. Okay. Everything else looks good. You can bring a dimension, you can move this dimension over here. Sometimes it'll let you, sometimes you have to redraw the whole thing. Yeah, it's not gonna let me. Mm-mm. No, it won't let me. I'm gonna also go ahead and dimension this side right here. And we'll go from wall face to wall face. And there's nothing here that needs to have interim dimensions on it. And then we can do the same thing here, although I'm going to skip it for right now because, like I said, we've got some information that's going to be added into this section right here. But we'll add it to this other wall here. And notice as I drag it, I'm trying to get this distance to be the same as this distance. So this distance is the same as this distance right here. And I'm going to do one more string. Notice I'm moving it up so that there's no overlap. And this one, I really don't want the dimension line to intersect with the door. And again, that's just good graphic standards. We don't want any overlap because overlap creates confusion. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to bring this one up just a little bit so it's not touching the wall. Okay. Now, one thing that you might notice here is we've got the tolerance here to 1/4 of an inch. Now, that's pretty precise for wall locations. And there are certain things that might be built to the nearest 1/4 of an inch in an interiors project or an architecture project, but the walls probably won't be. In fact, if you ask a contractor to build a wall that's 7 feet 5 1/4 inches, the contractor will probably not do it. So what we want to do is actually change our tolerance a little bit for this dimension style. So let's go ahead and click this, and I'm going to hit edit type. And what I want you to do is go down and see this units format. Okay, and you can see if we had walls drawn this way, it would actually draw to the nearest 32nd of an inch. And so we have to change this because this can junk up our dimensions or make our dimensions really overly precise and add a bunch of digits that are not necessary. They can compromise the overall clarity of the drawing. So I'm going to uncheck this box for use project settings, and I'm going to round things to the nearest inch. And I'm going to hit apply and OK. And then now you can see that there's no fractions in our measurements. And so again, it just looks a lot cleaner, and fractions are not necessary with this, with the large scale of this plan. Now, down the road, we may dimension, you know, for example, if we were going to create a set of construction documents and we had a reception desk that was super detailed and we needed to create a detail of how a joint was going to come together, then it would make sense that we would have dimensions, you know, to the nearest 32nd of an inch or 1/4 of an inch. But for walls and wall locations for framing purposes, it's just not necessary. So as you can see, we've placed a north arrow. We've learned how to hide and show annotations, and we've learned how to place interim and overall dimensions just in a very basic way, and to set the precision, or sometimes it's called the tolerance, for our dimension lines. And so that's the first few types of annotations that you need to be aware of.